Welcome into Bucs Insider presented by Verizon. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith, and we are getting into our off-season versions of these shows. But man, we got plenty to talk about. Just because the season's over did not mean we were hurting for content here on this edition of Insider.
We've had some developments.
Some developments, that is a way of putting it. We will start with a very sad one for us. Happy for him. Coach Canales leaving to go to the Panthers. Incredible opportunity for him, which is wonderful, but I know all of us here are very sad to see him go. Great coach, even better guy to work around and be around, and a great family, and just very excited for them, but all of us here, very sad.
Yeah, it's bittersweet for us, obviously, because I think you said it, but it's twofold. I think he did a great job, and had he remained in that post as our offensive coordinator, I think it would have just got better and better. Very talented guy, obviously, but also a guy that everybody grew to like very, very much in just one season. So it's sorry to see him go, but when you are fond of a person, you want to see them live their dreams, you know?
Yep.
I know it was his dream. He said he'd prepared for it, and obviously prepared well, because the Panthers interviewed a lot of people. And I don't think 2 months ago Dave's name was being mentioned in the same level as like a Ben McDonald or somebody like that. And so for him to be the one that went in and got the job suggests that he really interviewed very well, which is, as knowing him, we're not surprised.
If anybody's watched any of his press conferences, we can understand a little bit of what it probably was like.
So good for him. It's hard to say we wish him the best since it's the Panthers. Beat the Saints. Can you do that for us? Beat the Saints.
There we go. That's what we can ask for. And then not only is he leaving, but typically the way this goes is as either coordinators get hired or head coaches get hired, they tend to, they start working on their staff, and it tends to be a lot of people they have worked with in the past, and that's how that works. And so it looks like a few other Bucs staff members are leaving to go join Coach Canales' group.
Which worked out for all of them, because some of these guys, they were on expiring contracts, so they could have stayed here, but they had new deals. But there was nothing blocking them from following, and I think the Buccaneers wish them well. Harold Goodwin following him, Joe Gilbert. Those two have been officially announced by the Panthers. It's only reported so far that Brad Idzik will be Dave's OC, but given how close we know those two are, that seems very, very believable. So the Buccaneers have some vacancies on their staff that they need to fill out.
Yeah, especially the Harold Goodwin and Joe Gilbert ones. They were a huge part of the running game. That it's not Skip Pete who was the running back coach, but it was Harold Goodwin was your run game coordinator. Joe Gilbert was your offensive line coach, and we saw how much progress the run game had been making this year. And so I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to track this offseason, of who replaces them and how they're able to try to keep that momentum that had been built.
It's an interesting dynamic, though, because, and I'm not saying in any way that there was any problems in the relationship between Todd Bowles and those coaches, but he didn't choose those coaches. Those were Bruce Arians' coaches. He inherited most of this coaching staff, so it'll be interesting to see what sort of connections out there, because Todd's been in the game for a long time. He has some connections. Who's out there who he would pick to put in those positions?
And so, of course, now the attention for the Bucs turns to replacing first Coach Canales, obviously, because then that will determine a lot of these other positions as well. So what do we know about who the team has talked to and who some of the candidates are that are out there?
Well, they didn't wait very long, because Coach Canales was hired by the Panthers last Thursday, and then on Friday the Bucs did their first interview for OC. It had to be a virtual one because it was with Antoine Randall, who was here briefly, started his coaching career here, and he's the Detroit Lions wide receivers coach, and last Friday they were still in it. They were preparing for the NFC Championship game, so that one had to be virtual. And then today, this week, to get things started, they've done in-person interviews at the Advent Health Training Center with Alex Van Pelt, who was most recently the Cleveland Browns offensive coordinator, Gerard Johnson, who is the Houston quarterbacks coach, which means he worked with C.J. Stroud, so he did a good job. That one's off the books now, though, because he got a promotion and a raise to stay with the Texans. Brian Johnson, formerly the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator, and Thad Lewis are the first in-house candidate. That's the quarterbacks coach who I know everybody over at One Buck is very fond of. I think he's done a really nice job, and obviously he worked very well with Baker Mayfield. Now, there have been some other reported connections. I think we're going to keep seeing several more interviews before this is all said and done, but those are the ones the team has confirmed so far.
Yeah, we remember Coach Bowles interviewed a lot of people before choosing Canales, so it does not seem surprising that he would do the same thing.
Well, it makes sense to cast a wide net.
Yes, absolutely. And then you brought up Mayfield. We have some great news when it comes to both Baker Mayfield and Tristan Wirfs, so tell us what happened this week.
They were both named to the Pro Bowl roster. We knew they were high alternates, so this was a possibility. Wirfs specifically replaces Trent Williams, because he's in the Super Bowl, and Baker specifically replaces Dak Prescott, who I think is playing, maybe not playing due to injury. And by playing is a bit of an exaggeration, because Tristan won't even play, I imagine, in a flag football game, and Baker will play, I guess. Mike Evans is not going to play due to injury. I don't think it's anything serious, but he's a Pro Bowler. He still counts as a Pro Bowler, but he's not going. So Tristan that's his third Pro Bowl, and it's pretty cool that he earned two Pro Bowls as a right tackle, made the switch this year to left tackle, and is still in the Pro Bowl.
That's a great point.
And that's 3 Pro Bowls in 4 seasons, and honestly, as a rookie, he probably was deserving. But he ties Mike Allstott. That's the most Pro Bowl invitations in the first 4 seasons of a Buccaneer player's career. That's pretty cool, huh? And then even the ones that had 2 is a pretty exclusive and cool list.
That is really great. Maybe I feel like a future article for you could be how many players make Pro Bowls at different positions.
It's just hard to look up.
I'm sure.
Like, I know he's not the first, because I knew off the top of my head Orlando Brown had done it. But I've even talked to some of the other reporters about that very topic.
Yeah.
And it's a really difficult thing to rehearse. Research. Some things you can research, you just have to figure out how and get the right parameters, and it goes quickly. Some things you have to do by blunt force. Just going year, and it's not worth it to me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, forget that I said that. Nobody
no articles there.
And then Baker Mayfield not only got the honor of getting to play in the Pro Bowl, but he got another honor as well that I think everyone here thinks he's very deserving of.
Most Improved Player by Pro Football Writers Association, or of America, I'm not sure which one it is. And then he also is one of the 5 candidates for Comeback Player of the Year, which we'll find out in the NFL Honors Show. But yeah, he obviously deserves that honor. I didn't even know that honor existed, to be honest with you, that award, but
we
it's
hear
pretty
the comeback a lot, but I haven't heard the Most Improved. But
it's kind of neat. And if you look at his numbers from 2022 to 2023, you can see why. And 2022, he had been traded by the Browns to the Panthers because the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson, and so they got rid of Baker. And then it wasn't a great situation in Carolina. Matt Rule, he got fired, 5 or 6 games in the season. And then they had rotating quarterbacks in Carolina, and eventually the Panthers, who were having a terrible season, waived him in December. He got picked up by the Rams. Had one really great game right after he got there, and one Player of the Week. But overall, when you put all the numbers together for that season and then compare them to this season, I think the most important thing is the very top mark, that top line up there, the starting record, 2-8 to 9-8. But every number he improved in. And if you look at the difference in the passer rating, that's quite impressive.
Incredible. Yeah,
so it was a great season. And, I don't know how to feel about Most Improved, because he probably would think, if you look at 2020, he has very similar numbers to 2023 when he was with the Browns and took them to the playoffs. So it's almost more like rebound, right, to the level of play that he knew he could get to.
So I know that one of the things this time of year is always we're wondering who's going to be a part of the team this next year. When does free agency start? One of the probably least paid attention to parts of that is the practice squad, but this is the time of year that we do find out a lot about who's coming back, and we've seen that can be an incredibly important part of the team in terms of not just getting your starters ready, but guys that can get called up and end up playing some big roles, especially if there's injury or things going on. So what do we know about who will be coming back in terms of the futures contracts?
Yeah, and you're right. A lot of times a guy like, say, Jose Ramirez, the 6th-round guy, edge that we drafted, he ended up on the practice squad this year and spent the whole year on the practice squad, but he can definitely rise next year to the roster potentially, depending on who's here and who's not and how much he improves. If you look at Mike Green, same thing. We re-signed him after a year on the practice squad, and then he made the active roster this past year, even started a couple games. So reserved future contracts are contracts that you sign like right now in January, but they take effect in 2024. It just means you don't have to wait, and you can get those guys back right away. And but they don't affect the salary cap right now. They apply to 2024. And the Bucs re-signed 14 of the 16 guys that were on their practice squad at the end of the season. And there may be you might eventually re-sign the other 2 as well. But for now, it's guys like Jose Ramirez, David Wells. Remember, he started the year on the active roster as one of the tight ends. Keenan Isaac, a cornerback that they played a little bit. Evan Deckers, the long snapper that they signed last year out of college, out of Duke, is back. So maybe he'll be pressing Zach Trinner potentially for that job. And then we did sign a handful of guys from other teams or just off the roster. One interesting one is a young man named Lual Uguic. I practiced that. Lual Uguik. He's from Canada. His family's originally from Sudan. He was born in Canada, and he's played a little bit in the CFL, but this is the first time he's signed with anybody in the NFL. He's a defensive tackle, so it'll just be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Because it's not often that a guy, his first time signed by an NFL team is in January.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That'll be fun to watch. And then I know that we're going to close with this. For the next several weeks, we're going to pick a different position each week to look at of the draft in terms of, is this something that we feel like the team could be targeting as we turn our attention to the draft and the offseason. So tell us the first position you wanted to address and see if this is something the Bucs might look at.
So the Bucs are picking 26 in the first round. So when I talk about potentially addressing this in the draft, I'm talking high, maybe this pick, maybe second round, something like that. And we haven't made a real deep dive into the draft yet. I haven't done a single mock draft, so this is more just like each week we're going to look at a position and see what's the state of that. Would the Bucs maybe draft something at that spot high? The Bucs did get to 48 sacks this season, which is the third most in a season in team history. Yet I would still say, do we have that star edge rusher that can get you 12 sacks, 14 sacks in a season? And I think, Yaya Diaby, the rookie, who had a great rookie season, led the team in sacks, which is awesome, especially out of the third round. So that's a nice piece right there. But 7.5 sacks as your sack leader, you'd probably like to see that be a little bit higher, right? And last year was 6.5 by Vita Vea. So the Buccaneers got a lot of sacks, but it was almost by committee. They had 9 different players have at least 2.5 sacks, and that includes some safeties and some linebackers. And so it all added up to a good sack number. And the Buccaneers were tied for the most players on a team this year that had at least 2.5 sacks, and that's good. And it also speaks to Todd Bowles' play calling prowess. But I still think it's possible that the Buccaneers would be interested if maybe a guy like Chop Robinson from Penn State or something like that makes it to 26th.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. All right, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider presented by Verizon. We'll be back all offseason with you, keeping you updated with these different coaching hires as well as looking ahead to the draft. We'll see you next time.